What if you wake up to find a Rolls-Royce parked in front of your garage with your name boldly written on it? What would you do? Yes, I agree. It's impossible. You don't even think you will ever own a luxurious car like a Rolls-Royce, not in your entire life. And now, you wish you could hit a jackpot or even win a lottery to afford that kind of luxury. Only if it was possible. Today, I will tell you about a boy who, exactly like you, was born in the very depths of poverty. But at the end of his life, he pioneered what became the best car in the world. Are you shocked? The question you should be asking is, how did an impoverished boy stumble on one of the brightest ideas in the universe? This is that rags to riches story. Born in Alwalton, Huntingdonshire, England in 1863, Henry Frederick Royce became the least member of an impoverished family. They barely survived on the flour mill that had been leased to his father, James Royce. And when the business met a disastrous end, the family packed their bags and moved to London. However, things did not get better. Having no family inheritance, title, or social relevance, Royce was a complete underdog. He was born at a time when children from impoverished families were expected to contribute towards the family budget. From a tender age, these children endured terrible work hours, unhealthy environments, and dangerous jobs, only to earn a lean wage. And for many of them who had no home to return to, they made their bed on the streets. For the first few years of his life, Royce was exempted from such conditions, but in 1872, his little world would crumble. His father passed away, leaving the small Royce family in dire financial conditions. Having only a year of formal schooling, Royce took up meager jobs, selling newspapers and delivering telegrams around the cold streets of London. The surprising fact about Royce's formative years was that despite his vulnerability, he never meddled with crime, nor did he wind up an errand boy for the Peaky Blinders. When he turned 15, his aunt saw that he started an apprenticeship with the Great Northern Railway Company. Sadly, she could only sponsor the apprenticeship for 3 years. After that, he worked with a toolmaking company in Leeds before returning to London, where he joined the Electric Light and Power Company. From this point on, Royce's life was a step closer to fulfilling destiny. When he turned 21, he quit his job, and with just £20 in his pocket and a best friend, Ernest Claremont, who had £50 to spare, Royce started his own organization, F.H. Royce & Company, which produced domestic electrical fittings in a little workshop in Manchester. The company struggled during its early years, with its founders having to part ways with their meals to make sure their venture survived. Thankfully, they didn't have to go hungry for too long. Their clientele increased, and at some point, the company's revenue was about $1 million in today's currency. Royce could have said a grand goodbye to poverty and basked in his hard-earned wealth, but in fact, it was at this moment of his life that fate took him on a different path. Royce was a self-taught genius. Everything he knew about engineering was obtained through decades of consistent study. When men in their 20s were busy flirting with the prettiest women, Royce was captivated by a new obsession: mechanical engineering. It was love at first sight. His company had been producing dynamos and electric cranes for a while, but in 1902, the arrival of newer competitions decreased his company's sales. However, Royce saw it as an opportunity to expand, as he had grown weary of that line of trade. Now, he wanted to make automobiles as much as he could breathe. A year later, he purchased a 1901 two-cylinder DeCauville, but the vehicle performed way below his expectations. So, he did what nobody else would have thought of. Royce undertook the arduous task of modifying it. At the end of the day, he had developed a passion to build his own vehicles from the scratch. By 1904, Royce had built his first two-cylinder vehicle, which he called the Royce 10. Satisfied with the outcome, he built 2 more vehicles of the same model. He gave one to his friend and partner, Ernest Claremont, and the other was sold to Henry Edmunds, who became known as the godfather of Rolls-Royce. As the story goes, Edmunds was so impressed by the Royce 10 that he arranged a meeting between Henry Royce and a famous car dealer, Charles Royce, in May 1904. However, when Rolls saw the Royce 10 for the first time, he was not impressed. He detested two-cylinder vehicles. But as he took a spin in the Royce 10, Rolls went wild with excitement. All his experience as a daredevil motorist could not compare to the feeling he was getting from the Royce 10. After the test drive, Rolls borrowed that car, sped back to London, jolted his partner Cloud Johnson in the middle of the night, and screamed into his poor ears, "I found the greatest motor engineer in the world!" In 1906, Charles Rolls and Henry Royce founded Rolls-Royce Limited, lending their last names to the luxurious car brand. Cloud Johnson was appointed the company's director and was later known as the hyphen in Rolls-Royce. Unlike Royce, Charles Rolls was born with a shiny silver spoon. He was an offspring of Lord and Lady Llangeddick of Monmouthshire. Rolls enjoyed the privileges that accompanied his birth, so much so that he became known as a playboy in his later years. However, there was a certain profundity to Rolls, his strange fascination for all things mechanical. In fact, he earned the nickname Dirty Rolls or Petrols because of the many times he was found hands deep in grease, but he was never perturbed by the taunts from his mates. Rolls would go on to study mechanical and applied science at Trinity College, Cambridge. In 1898, he won a half blue at cycling while he was still an undergraduate, and he also captained the cycling team. When he got out of Cambridge, he became a daring motorist. Rolls was phenomenal. He finished fourth in his class at his very first race in 1899, and in 1903, he steered his 80-horsepower Moore's race car to a top speed of 83 miles per hour. No motorist had attained such speed in the history of the tracks. It was unbelievable. Rolls had set a new land speed record. Unfortunately, it wasn't officially recognized, but for everyone who witnessed the event, Charles Rolls was a demigod. But beyond the glories of the racetrack, the cheers from thousands of spectators, beyond the heat, speed, and adrenaline of racing, Rolls loved to fly. So intense was his passion for air travel that he coined his now famous maxim: "The power of flight is as a fresh gift from the Creator, the greatest treasure yet given to man." What more could he ask for? Having the greatest treasure yet given to man was no small task at all. Rolls became the second Briton to obtain a license to fly, and in the years that followed, he made over 150 balloon ascents. In 1901, Charles Rolls took a balloon flight with a wealthy motorist, Frank Hedges Butler, and his daughter Vera. While they sipped expensive champagne and admired the beautiful landscape England had to offer, an idea popped in their minds. That idea became the Royal Aero Club in 1910. Rolls was famous for a ton of things, but his most spectacular achievement was flying non-stop across the English Channel and back in June 1910. With that feat, Rolls had saved England from humiliation after not one, but two French pilots had flown across the Channel months earlier. He received a congratulatory telegraph straight from Buckingham Palace by its then regents, King George and Queen Mary. And to top it off, a local newspaper called him the greatest hero of the day. But while all these went on, Henry Royce was rarely in the spotlight. He was the perfect example of an obsessed workaholic. Perhaps his lifestyle was influenced by his favorite maxim: strive for perfection in everything you do. Take the best that exists and make it better. When it does not exist, design it. Royce was so invested in his pursuit of perfection that he would often skip meals, to his detriment. Well, his sacrifices eventually paid out, because a year after it started, Rolls-Royce Limited would introduce its first vehicle model to the world, a 40-50 horsepower 6-cylinder vehicle that was called the Silver Ghost. Silver as being pure and hallmarked, and Ghost as being symbolic of its smooth, silent, effortless movements, the 6-cylinder Rolls-Royce, not one of the best, but the best car in the world. What an advert! However, the car still had to pass the dreadful Scottish reliability trial, a course that runs through the torturous 2-mile Rest and Be Thankful hill, which in the past had humiliated several vehicles. And for this trial, the Silver Ghost would race against a white steam car. But in the end, the Silver Ghost emerged victorious. It earned a gold medal for reliability, excellent hill climbing, and fuel consumption. Royce had done it. He had attained perfection. The Silver Ghost would remain the only Rolls-Royce model for 16 years. By 1910, The car had become extremely popular. Even the great Henry Ford became a potential owner. Besides, the real value behind a Rolls-Royce was the fact that it wasn't meant for everybody. As a matter of fact, a Rolls-Royce marketing head once boasted that their target audience isn't sitting around watching television. And I guess you know what that means. But hey, before you throw your TV out the window, make sure it's got insurance, because you're likely not going to buy a Rolls-Royce anytime soon. And living without a TV in 2023 isn't a piece of advice I'd give anyone. If there is one thing about success stories, it is the fact that it always has no perfect ending. Henry Royce and Charles Rolls had come a long way from a single meeting in 1904. Royce was the brains of the company while Rolls was its face. His wealth, connections, and experience in car dealerships launched the company into the limelight. Also, Rolls won the Isle of Man Tourist Trophy with a Rolls-Royce vehicle in 1906, which was a big win for the company. In fact, when the factory learned about Rolls' victory, they hoisted Royce in celebration. However, Charles Rolls would quit the tracks for good. But before he did, he had to ask Royce to build flight engines as he desired to tow that path. But Royce refused. Later on, Rolls resigned from his position as the company's technical director to pursue his passion for flying. His sole inspiration was the fact that there were no policemen in the air. Hilarious. He did make reputable achievements, but a month after he was widely celebrated for his famous 95-minute non-stop flight across the English Channel, Charles Stewart Rolls perished in a plane crash at the young age of 32. His demise dealt a blow to England and the company he co-founded. Rolls was described as the stuff of which the best Englishmen are made. His statue was erected in Agincourt Square, Monmouth, in honor of the striking achievements he made in his short life. Charles Rolls was the first Briton to perish in a plane crash. "15 years after the tragedy, Rolls-Royce released its second car model, the Phantom 1. As usual, years of hard work had gone into it. But as it turned out, the Phantom 1 was only a slight upgrade of the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost. Unfortunately, the vehicle was introduced a month before the 1929 Wall Street disaster, and the following year, the United States was crushed by the Great Depression. Sad to say, these historical events had a drastic effect on the sale of the Phantom 1. However, Royce wasn't put off by the poor reception. He delved back to work and built the Phantom 2, and then the Phantom 3, and it went on and on and on. 2 years after the Phantom model was built, Royce stumbled on his brightest idea ever. As he walked on the beach of his West Wittering home with a couple of his leading engineers, he suddenly stopped and sketched a design on the sand. A year later, that sketch turned out to be the company's first ever R engine. And guess what? It was highly successful. Royce had a penchant for setting records, and it wasn't a surprise when the R engine set a new world airspeed record of 357.7 miles per hour the very year it was built, and won the Schneider Trophy. The R engine pioneered the Rolls-Royce ascent into the aeronautical world, and decades later, the company would remain an active aero engine manufacturer. After 29 years of hard work, ingenuity, and spectacular innovations, Royce finally succumbed to illness. However, as he lay on his deathbed, the frail Henry Frederick Royce made a shocking statement. "I have only one regret, that I have not worked harder." Those were the last words. But truly, it is unbelievable. Royce had paid the ultimate price, despising pleasure, fame, and risking his own life to birth one of the most luxurious brands in the world. So if he regrets not working hard enough, then I guess my entire life has been a joke. But thankfully, I wouldn't be the only joker around. Royce lived a fulfilling life, and his efforts have made Rolls-Royce an emblem of excellent craftsmanship. The company's latest model, the Boat Tail, is currently the most expensive car in the world, with a price tag of £25 million. Lest I forget, after his demise, Henry Frederick Royce became the first and only engineer to be honored with a memorial window in Westminster Abbey. Now here's a shocker. Do you know that the mascot on the hood of a Rolls-Royce has a dark history? Originally called the Spirit of Speed, it was first seen on the hood of a Rolls-Royce in 1911. However, it wasn't the figure of the winged mascot that you see today. As the story goes, the second Baron Montague of Beaulieu convinced his friend Charles Skies to design a figurine that would be modeled after Baron's secretary and secret lover, Eleanor Velasco Thornton. Sticking with the idea behind its creation, the mascot was named the Whisper and portrayed a lady in flowing robes placing a forefinger to her lips. Sadly, the relationship met a tragic end. Later on, Rolls-Royce designed its own mascot and called it the Spirit of Ecstasy. And I bet the next time you see a Rolls-Royce, you'll remember every bit of this story.